how did you get interested in West African music? How did you make that connection?
So I was on my way to Sweden in 2001. I just finished recording a record called Sachte Vlee, where I was playing the viola in a kind of string quartet and working with a wonderful musician called Alex van Heerden, who I worked with over a 10-year period before he died in 2009. And Alex was rediscovering the folk musics of the Western Cape, around Cape Town, the farm music. He was very steeped in the Cape jazz style. And we made this record uh, fusing his knowledge of the melodies and rhythms around us here with ideas from contemporary composition, from Reich to Messiaen to Stravinsky, things that I'd sort of picked up, in my years in the conservatory. And we made this record, and I was really inspired by it, but I wasn't playing the guitar, and I couldn't really work out what I would do on the guitar. And so I tried to translate that same space into a guitar album, and I made an 8-string guitar album called Blomdorens, which explores some of those ideas. And then on my way to Sweden to go and work with Alex again, we took like a sabbatical in there to be in the snow and record with a friend. A friend of mine gave me a CD. It was a burnt CD. It said KORA on it, Kaira. I actually have it here somewhere. I don't know. And it had this guy, or maybe three people, playing a string instrument that I didn't know anything about it, but it was turned out to be a solo KORA album by Tumani Diabate. And if you're in South Africa, you're not going to bump into a KORA. You're going to see KORAs all over the place in like weird places like South Carolina, but you're not going to see one in Cape Town. No way.
Right.
The two KORAs in the country and that I know of, and they're in the hands of a musician called Pops Muhammad, who got them from two very famous KORA players from the Gambia who visited in the 80s, Kausu Kuyate and Dembe Conte. So that's, and Pops does his own thing, so you're not going to hear the griot style KORA. So I didn't know what this was, but I heard, Bach meets meets groove, meets cyclical music, complexity, but at the same time, this trance element that we were exploring in the Western Cape music, which was inspiring on one level, but I didn't have any way to kind of use my chops that I'd been working on so hard,
Yeah.
trying to
Right.
learn Bach fugues and things.
Right.
So, but there was the problem that you couldn't play it on guitar. It was too hard. The guy was playing like three different melodies at the same time, and they were all in different time signatures, and it was super free, and he was improvising like Keith Jarrett, and it was like kind of depressing.
Hmm. And how did you? I've been just kind of dipping my toes into the Kyra course that you made, and um, the tuning that you've settled into, which is D-A-D, F sharp, B-E, and then capo at the third fret. How did you arrive at that?
Something like that.
Yeah.
So what I decided was, so this was 10 years after first hearing Tumani. In those 10 years, he influenced my composition and he influenced my way of playing. If I played a piece of Bach, I would think in terms of the phrasing I was hearing. And he made me start to, think about phrasing especially differently, and also the attacks. But I still couldn't do that,
Yeah.
what he was doing, that kind of, whoa. Uh, so I was playing vihuela music. I found these tablatures, the original facsimiles, where they've got an upside down tablature, so the high note is at the bottom, and I trained myself to read tablature upside down, and they're beautiful. They're like woodcuts, they're just fabulous, and the music is marvelous. I mean, you'll know the music. It's and the tuning for that is E A D F sharp E E. I've got a kappa on. This kind of
Yeah.
thing. And so I'd spent a year playing that music, and that changed my way of understanding the guitar as a kind of harp where you could shorten the strings. So you were always hearing closed notes against open notes, which was kind of different to the kind of bar chord, avoid open strings, classical guitar thing that was, I'd studied with, Paul Galbraith, who plays an 8-string guitar, and it's very pianistic kind of way. And this was really going back to the simplest way of playing the guitar. And so when I decided to transcribe this music, then I thought, well, I'm just going to tune the guitar however I want. So I was just listening to the recording, and I had three options. I could retune strings, I could move the capo, or I could pitch shift the recording. And I would just kind of move these three things around until something clicked. And in the beginning, actually, each piece had a completely different tuning. I would just write them down, kind of like Joni Mitchell style,
Right.
and
Right.
then tablature it out. So it didn't matter what tuning I was in, and often I didn't even know. So I would retune the instrument until it kind of matched the recording. I would have this, Joni Mitchell style tuning and write it out in tablature so that it didn't matter. A second fret is a second fret. It didn't matter if it was an A or I didn't even know.
Right.
So I wasn't thinking in terms of chords, structures, or anything. In fact, years later, when I was doing arrangements with another guitarist, he would be like, "Hey, that's a C major," and for the first time, it kind of occurred to me, like, "Oh, yeah, I suppose it is." So it was a great exercise in actually separating my playing from any idea of chords and harmony, which worked for me because my brain didn't like that way of understanding music. It never worked for me. I'm a violinist originally, and chords and stuff, chord theory and that, it was all made sense on paper, but practically it was never a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then eventually I realized that one of the tunings I'd come up with worked for all the pieces, which in retrospect, of course they would, because the KORA, it uses two modes, one of two modes. So, and that was this tuning, and I couldn't believe it. My God, you can put a guitar in this tuning, and you can literally play anything in the KORA repertoire without changing it, like straight
Wow.
off the page. Well, there's no page, but
Right.
and that was immensely exciting, and it kept me happy for 10 years.
Wow. Wow. Wow.